Last week, I introduced you to the origin story of Blink, from my 2017 musical, all the way through to COVID, and the reasons why I wrote a one-man gay rom-com for the Edinburgh Fringe. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, please do so, as this story continues on from that at the beginning of 2023, and thankfully, I'm not on my own this time. I had a wonderful director called Paul T. Davies helping me every step of the way. This is RefractedWorld. Once the 2022 shows were over, I met up with Paul quite a few times and we stayed in touch on email or via the phone. He gave me notes on the old script and I worked on a brand new one. I even wrote a song. The original was songless. In May, we started rehearsing in London and together we created a fully formed theatre production with lighting, music, projector, song and direction. It gave the play structure and framework, things it had always needed. I even got new marketing materials made, which looked brilliant. So much was new and improved that I decided to change the title from Blink and You'll Miss It to Blink, a one-man gay rom-com. Blink had never been an outright comedy, but as a one-man stage production, many people thought it would be like a stand-up show. The title now told the audience exactly what the play was before entering the room. A rom-com is usually humorous, more than a laugh-a-minute funny. It was a gay rom-com, so that meant it was gay-themed, and it was performed by one person. Together, with the updated script, it really did feel like a fully formed production. That's not to say I still wasn't terrified before stepping out on the stage on opening night. It was the 16th of August, 2023, and the small, windowless dressing room was like a sweatbox. I was performing at the Etc. Theatre in Camden, a wonderful performance space, but one which that week was having problems with their aircon. This was terrible timing, but the show must go on. The first night, I was a sticky mess. I had changed the script to walk onto the stage at the start rather than being seated staring at my phone. What I hadn't realised was just how much more daunting this would be. The wait before walking from the dressing room to the stage is one of, if not the, most intense and frightening things I have ever done. I never had this fear when I was acting in the past, but here and now, I was truly terrified. There was no one with me in that dressing room, and I can still feel that sense of panic in my stomach thinking back to it now, listening to the audience enter, the music playing in the auditorium, and me waiting for it to stop so I could walk out onto the stage. There was a real lack of air in the dressing room, and I was constantly drinking water in fear of having a dry mouth, something which is common in live performances. Fear causes an excess of adrenaline which dries the mouth, and could close your throat. If you've ever seen singing contests on TV, in the audition section, this happens a lot. Always have water at hand for this very reason. Opening nights are usually the hardest. All the preparation in the world can't prepare you for opening night nerves, and this time it was scarier than Edinburgh. Up there, you don't have time to think. You've got 10 minutes from walking in, setting up, and then performing. Here, I had an hour. I would get to the venue, meet with the technician, go over the light and stage prompts, and then get changed, nervous wee, pacing in the dressing room, final nervous wee, pacing and waiting. Waiting for the audience to amble in. The sounds of the footsteps and muffled talking seeping through the walls. The whole time I'm getting more and more nervous and trying to stay cool as the temperature kept rising along with my internal panic. The last time I performed, I'd forgotten my script. What if that happens again? What if I can't cover it? What if I can't remember the script at all? These thoughts plagued me that night. A part of me honestly wanted to pick up my stuff and run away from the theatre never to be seen again. But that wasn't an option. There was an auditorium full of paying people. My husband was in the first row and a representative from a gay charity was watching, ready to give a speech at the end of the show. I sucked in air deeply in an attempt to centre myself. A light knock on the door and a thumbs up from the stage manager was my cue. What was I doing? Why was I doing this? I quietly waited in the wings for the music and lighting to change before walking out onto the stage. Due to the lack of aircon, I had 2 big fans blasting air from either side of the stage, but it still wasn't enough, underneath the bright lights and the fear. Hi everyone. My opening line started my hour-long monologue. I was nervous. I raced through the script so fast. I was once again out of breath after my first scene. And once again, I internally was screaming at myself to slow down, pace myself, enjoy it. But it wasn't working. I finished 7 minutes early, and I was mentally kicking myself for not trusting myself and my months of rehearsals. The speech after the show was well received, and I travelled home with a smile on my face. Although not my best performance, the play had gone well. But tomorrow would be better, I told myself. Unfortunately, tomorrow would be the worst performance of my entire life. I once again arrived at the theatre 1 hour before showtime. But that night, I had a new technician, one I'd never met before. But all of the information had been emailed to him days before. Unfortunately, he hadn't looked at that email and knew nothing about me or my play. He didn't even have the lighting cues or any of the music. He didn't know how to use the projector. It was fine, I told myself. I had the music on a flash drive, which I gave to him, and I had the text script with me, which I gave to him, and that had all the cues in it. What more would he need? All he had to do was download the music and input the cues. We still had 30 minutes to go. It would be fine. It took him 15 minutes to work out how to get the projector down, and once there, his laptop was projected onto that screen. We watched in real time as he opened the email from Rebecca, discovered he hadn't got the program needed to run the music, and downloaded it to his Mac, and then scanned through the instructions of how to use it. I was freaking out. With just 10 minutes to go, the stage manager delayed the audience. Over the next 30 minutes, the technician struggled with everything, unable to play the music or get the projector working the way it was needed for my show. In the end, I said I would perform without music or without the projector, but I would need backing for my song, which he promised I would have. 30 minutes later than advertised, I stepped out onto the very hot stage to huge applause from the audience who were just thankful I had started. I apologised for the late start and announced that due to technical issues, I would be performing the show without music. It was now incredibly hot and humid in the theatre, but I gave it my all that night. The same cannot be said for the technician, who managed to mess up every single lighting change. At some points, the wrong lights would come on, or he'd be switching them through the settings whilst I was talking, and at one point, I was in total darkness for a good 30 seconds before the lights came back up. And yet, I continued. Near the end of the play is a very emotional scene. It's always so quiet at that point, you could almost hear a pin drop. Yet that night, we all heard a loud thud. I looked up to see someone had collapsed over the second row with people gasping. My first thought was that someone had died of a heart attack or something. Now, an actor isn't usually supposed to break character, but this was far too serious to ignore. I rushed over to see if I could help and discovered it was a woman who had passed out from the heat. She woke up pretty quickly and apologised, and then we all asked her if she wanted to leave, but she said no, it's fine. So I continued the show. Unfortunately, just a few minutes later, she and her friend decided to leave, but only to sit right outside the theatre doors and chattered quite loudly. But I kept on going. Thankfully, the audience responded well to the play, and when it got to my song, I thought, at least this will go well. I said my cue line, turned to the audience, and the music started, but it was the wrong track. The technician was playing the entrance music for the audience and not the backing for my song. I looked at the box and said, no, not that one, and then back to the audience with an embarrassed smile. Looks like I was singing this a cappella tonight then. I'd never sung it without music before, but I did it, and it seemed to go down well. When the show was over, I was seriously exhausted. This show in particular is emotionally draining for me, and with the added problems and the late finish, I just wanted to go home. But as we'd bought a house 90 minutes away, it meant we didn't get back home until after midnight. There were 2 reviewers in the audience that night, and I worried what they would make of the performance, but both of them emailed me to say they wouldn't be writing their reviews due to the technical problems. I did understand this, but also I was disappointed. I really pushed myself to give the best performance that night and hoped that would be reflected in their reviews, but Hey ho, tomorrow was another day. I just hoped I didn't have the same technician. After sleeping on it, I sent an email to the theatre the next morning explaining everything that happened. They were really great about it, actually, apologising and promising it would all be sorted for my show that night. And when I arrived, I discovered that the technician had been fired and my original and brilliant technician Rebecca had come in on her day off. I also found out mine wasn't the only show he had messed up, although mine was by far the worst. The Friday night performance was busy, and it was also being professionally filmed. I was once again mic'd up before the show and felt more ready than I had the previous two nights. Although I was still nervous, I had just gone through the worst night ever, and so anything would be better than that. Thankfully, everything was. It went really smoothly. The lighting and music cues were all on time, the audience were responding well to the humorous parts and the emotional parts, and I enjoyed the performance. And yet, once again, when it was over, I felt utterly drained. I don't want to give away the story here. You can watch the entire show, filmed on that night on my YouTube channel, but the story really was having a massive effect on me. Much more than the previous year. Blink isn't a full-on comedy, it's a rom-com, humorous anecdotes mixed in with love and serious themes, and it was those themes that were squeezing me dry. At the end of my run in London, I was taken aside by the theatre manager. She praised my show, she praised me, and said that they wanted me to bring all my performances to the Etc. Theatre and to call it my theatrical home. They also invited me back for Blink for 2 extra dates the next month because it had been so successful. This was my dream come true. This was everything I wanted. The previous year meeting Paul, and then this year in 2023 having a theatre that loved what I did and wanted me back. It just felt everything was coming together. I did have one rider though, one major condition before signing the new contract for the extra dates, and that was to keep my amazing technician Rebecca. Thankfully, they agreed. The reviews were also incredible. Not only was I gaining 5 stars from critics, Blink was also nominated for an award, the Standing Ovation Award. I received quite a lot of standing ovations through my performance times, but to actually get nominated for the award was just... I can't explain how good that made me feel. After a really rocky start, my play was finally getting the recognition that it deserved. I had a few weeks off before going on stage in September for my extra dates. Those were fun to do. The pressure had been lifted, and although I was still in a state of panic in the dressing room, those minutes waiting to go on stage are by far the most nerve-wracking minutes throughout the entire show. The aircon had been fixed, so I no longer needed the fans on stage with me, which made it for a more comfortable experience. And this time, there was no one passing out in the audience. Seriously, you don't want that to happen anywhere in life, but especially in situations like that. There were also no reviewers in the audience for these 2 final extra performances, and that's because I didn't invite any press. I'd been there, I'd done that, I'd got the 5 stars, I'd been awarded a nomination. I didn't need nor want the added pressure of seeing someone with a notepad and pen from the corner of my eye throwing off my performance. These extra dates were special editions due to popular demand from the audience and the theatre, and I wanted to enjoy them as well, which I really did. On my final London performance, a man waited back to speak to me. He was American and had followed my performance journey throughout on Twitter. He had decided to take a trip to London during my show so he could see it whilst on holiday. He hugged me and told me my play was better than any he'd seen on the West End. Whether he meant that or not didn't matter. I could see the genuine emotion in his eyes, and I was so grateful he had taken the time not only to see my show, but also to tell me that afterwards. There was little rest for me after the performance, as I was now just weeks away from Colchester Fringe. Paul, my director, mentor, and now close friend, lives in Colchester and wanted to bring Blink to his hometown. We rehearsed in London and in Colchester, giving me a preview of what to come. The theatre I was to perform in was wonderful, and the biggest to perform in. I updated all the marketing materials to add the additional 5-star reviews and the award nomination. The poster and flyer looked more appealing than ever before. We had a hotel booked within walking distance from the venue, and everything was set for the end of October. Unfortunately, I had injured myself in between the time of London and Colchester, and had increasing pain from my left shoulder all the way down my left arm. I hadn't done anything to it, and was unsure why this pain wouldn't go away. After seeing my doctor and 2 physiotherapists, I was told stress was the primary cause. I was given exercises to do, which I did, but those and the medication just would not shift this pain and the numbness that I was feeling. By the time I arrived in Colchester, I had already made a huge decision. These would be the final 2 performances ever, or at least for the foreseeable future. I didn't want to perform Blink anymore. I'd written a script which came not only from the heart, but also borrowed from my past as well as people I know and love. Performing this play, retelling the story, and crying on stage every night was draining me both mentally and physically. There was also added emotional pressure from my personal life, which was now building to a crescendo, and I just couldn't deal with everything all at once. So much has happened to me in my life. I want to share my experiences and my knowledge with others, but I've discovered that most people just don't want to listen. They are so caught up in their own lives and own worlds, they don't want to hear about somebody else's lives, or their struggles. I have tried to talk about things so many times in the past, but have been brushed away as if I'm trying to tell them how they should think or live their lives, which has never been my intention. So when I wrote the musical in 2017, I took some of my knowledge and wove it into the story, told through the characters. This time, people watched, they listened, they understood, and they learned. And I know this because we had Q&A sessions after each performance of Blink of an Eye, and the audience asked us about the things they had seen. Blink is the sequel to my musical. It is about Jake's life 15 years later, this time played by me without a cast behind me. Yet I still wanted to continue what I'd started in the musical. There, Jake dates a black guy who tests positive for HIV. As he learns about the disease, so do the audience. In Blink, Jake marries a different black guy who also has HIV and talks openly about it. He also discusses what it's like being in an interracial relationship, something I know about very well, and how terrible life is for the gay community in most countries in Africa. There are a lot of hard-hitting themes that run throughout the show, but all through Jake's perspective as he recounts them to the audience. He brings them into his life as if he's telling a close friend his story. This is why there are always people crying in the audience at the end of the show, because they've been on this journey with him. They are emotionally entwined and invested. The audience can both sympathise and empathise with Jake, and they maybe even learn something along the way. This is what I do with my podcast. I educate whilst entertaining. I can talk to you about anything, any subject at all, and bring it down to a personal level of understanding. This is a skill that has only developed since writing the musical in 2017, and I believe it has made me a much better writer because of it. We arrived in Colchester on the Friday afternoon, just in time for my tech rehearsal. Paul met us there along with the 2 technicians. I was excited. Unfortunately, everything that could go wrong in the tech did. Lighting, music, projection cues, they just didn't work as intended. After 2 hours, I was reassured that everything would be perfect for my first show the following night. I didn't know these technicians, but if Paul had faith in them, so did I. There wasn't much else I could do. After a quick change at the hotel, we were back out to watch a show along with Paul, in the same theatre I would be performing in. It was funny and entertaining, and it was great for me to see the stage all lit up and in action. Afterwards, we did some mingling with cast and crew, and although we did attend the late night party, we only stayed for 1 drink. I wanted a clear head before performance day. Colchester is a beautiful city. We walked around the park, through the castle, and had lunch in town. Seeing my face looking back at me from posters on lampposts and shop windows was strange, but also nice. Although, this made me start feeling nervous again. The dressing room at the Headgate Theatre is a good one. Not only did I have more space, there was also a live feed of the stage camera showing on a monitor in there. I could watch the audience arrive in real time. Once again alone, I paced up and down, stretching my legs and drinking water as if I'd been stranded in an arid desert for days on end. Something I had learned in the London dressing room, which helped me calm down, was to talk to myself. Actually looking into my own eyes through the reflection in the mirror, I would say, "Stay calm, you've got this. You know the script, you know how to tell the story, enjoy every second of it, and the audience will enjoy it too," or something to that effect. And it really does work. We look in the mirror all the time, but we rarely look into our own eyes and have a conversation. Or maybe you do. I don't know what you do in your spare time. For me, I was talking to myself for the first time in a very long time. Give it a try next time you're stressed out or in need of emotional support when you find yourself alone. It really did work for me. My cue to go on stage was a pre-recorded announcement. As it played, I quietly opened the stage door and hid behind the curtain, waiting. And then silence fell, and I bounded onto the stage. My nerves instantly fell away the second I opened my mouth to speak. I told the whole story without forgetting any lines, my pacing was perfect, and the range of emotions were all on display. There was just one major flaw. The projector behind me didn't work, or at least didn't work as it was supposed to, and as I didn't turn around until I was singing, I didn't know it wasn't working. And when I did, all I could see was a DVD logo dancing around the screen as if the laptop was in screensaver mode. There was nothing I could do about it. I was mid-song, and there was nothing the technician could do about it, obviously. So I continued singing and then finished the performance. At the end of the show, a 16-year-old boy approached me. He was there with his parents. We talked about the play, and he told me how much he'd enjoyed it, and then talked about himself as a young gay man. He also asked if I had a podcast, as he could listen to me monologue all day long. I didn't, but I promised him I would start one. And he is why you're listening to me right now, and why Refracted World was born. I'd always wanted to do a podcast, but hadn't known how to begin it or if anybody even wanted it. But his words were the push I needed. I don't remember his name, and I don't know if he knows I've got a podcast, but if you are listening to this, please say hello, because I want to say thank you properly. I also spoke to a man and woman who thanked me for educating them in some of the areas they had never heard of before. They hugged me, and I cried. This is why I put myself out there. This is why I pushed past my anxiety and fears. I have certain talents that I'm good at. I can articulate myself pretty well, and I can write. And so I feel it's my duty to share my shared knowledge and experiences with others, because not everyone can do what I do. Tech issues aside, I was really pleased with how the performance had gone. I later found out that a new piece of equipment was needed to allow the projector to work as intended for my show, which was bought the next morning, ready for my final show ever. I had talked with Paul about Blink and said I didn't want to do it again. He knew the immense pressure I was putting on myself, and we agreed we would write a brand new play together for the following year's Fringe, which sounded really exciting. I was also approached by another writer who had seen me there at the Fringe and asked to star in his show the following year. And on top of that, the Etc. Theatre in London wanted me to bring a brand new show there as well. If all went well, I would be writing and performing 3 new shows in 2024. But of course, things rarely go as planned. The dressing room was in chaos when I arrived for my final show. The performance before me were packing up their stuff, and they had a lot of stuff. On top of that, one of the performers had twisted her ankle and had her foot in a bowl of ice water. For the first time ever, I wasn't as nervous. Having people with me in the dressing room, even chaotically, and even when they're injured, it really helped me. I explained my nerves and we chatted about it, and they said they went through exactly the same thing, telling me those few steps from the dressing room to the stage are the hardest part of the whole experience. And they'd been touring the world with their show, and they told me it had never got easier for them. So it wasn't just me then. That made me feel so much better. I thought I was being abnormal, or maybe I shouldn't have been doing this. But them telling me that made me realise that it wasn't just me. When the announcement rang out that night, they all hugged me and wished me luck, telling me they'd be watching my performance from the monitor in the dressing room. I had a huge smile on my face when I hid behind the curtain, and when I bounded onto the stage, no part of me was nervous. I performed my best show ever. I even improvised new lines and hammed up the funny parts, something I'd been too afraid to do before, because what if I said something and it went wrong, or what if I said something and forgot my next line? But I didn't. I just went with the audience. And it was incredible to me just how much having people on my side in the dressing room had helped me perform that night. I finished to a full standing ovation. All lights, music, and projector had worked as scripted, and I was so overcome with emotion I couldn't help cry as I thanked the audience and announced this would be my very last showing of Blink. I thanked Ken and Paul for their unwavering support. I thanked the tech team, the theatre, and I thanked the many people who had helped this story come together. I gave Ken and Paul a massive hug, and we took some pictures on the stage before clearing it. And we stayed to watch the final show of The Fringe, which was in the same theatre. And then we walked to the after-show party along with the casts and crew, and we had a fantastic end of Fringe party with karaoke and far too many shots and dancing, and I chatted with so many people, many who had seen my show, and all of them invited me back for the following year. On the train home, I felt happy. Blink may have been over, but after 2 years, I had accomplished what I'd set out to do. I'd performed my play in 3 different cities, I had met new people and made new friends in the industry I was in, and 2024 would be the year I was no longer struggling to be seen. I had 3 shows I would be performing in, and I had 2 theatres that wanted me back. Everything had worked out. But as we're in May 2024, you now know that that didn't happen, because something major in my personal life took over. And life doesn't always go to plan. But hey, there's always next year. Blink will always be a significant milestone in my life, in all of its 3 incarnations. I have learned so much on this journey, and I like to think the audiences have too. There is a 3rd play already written in my head, the conclusion to Jake's story, but I'm not ready to write that yet. If you would like to see the play, it is now on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. As I don't plan on performing it anytime soon, I didn't see the harm in sharing it with all of you. I'm also not monetizing the show, but if you could please subscribe to my channel, like, share, and comment on the video, that will be payment enough. My channel hosts a lot of podcasts and videos, and the more audience I have, the more people that can see and hear those. As for me, so far this year, I have really concentrated on this podcast. Paul and I still plan on writing the play together, and I am looking forward to writing a new play for the Etc. Theatre, and hopefully both will be out next year. I can't wait to see what next year brings. And that's the end of this episode, and the end of Season 1. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for all the amazing comments I've been getting, all the feedback I've been getting. It really does make my job worthwhile by putting this out every week. And I wouldn't have continued doing it for so long if it wasn't for you. And yeah, I'll be back in a few weeks. Like I said, I might as well tell you now, I've basically subscribed for a year to Adobe, and I am trying my hardest to learn how to use Adobe Premiere Pro, because I would like to take my podcast as it is and create a video from it, because then there's visual aid as well. So you could still listen to it wherever you're listening to this podcast right now, but you'll also have the opportunity to watch it on YouTube as well, if I can work out how to do it. And I know most people take years to learn. I'm giving myself a few weeks. And I have been spending the past few weeks doing it, and I'm learning the basics. I'm watching lots of YouTube videos, lots of tutorials. It's going all right. And yes, I'm hoping when I come back, Season 2 will be in audio and video format. Fingers crossed that's what happens, but if not, I promise the podcast will just come back as it is. If I can't do it as well as I hope, or I just fail at it, which I hope I don't, but if I do, the podcast will just come back because I enjoy doing this. I enjoy sharing my life experiences and knowledge, and I know from the comments I've got that you do too. So don't worry, Refracted World will be back, and as I've said, you can still continue listening to the previous episodes if you never have, or subscribe to Refracted World Plus, and seriously, a few weeks will go by no time, and when I come back, hopefully you'll be able to watch the video as well. Who knows? In the meantime, of course, don't forget to check out my YouTube channel, Dramatic Much Terry, and see Blink for yourself. The entire show that was filmed in London last year is on my channel right now, and it's totally free. Obviously, it's always better to see a theatre show in the theatre, but I do hope you enjoy the show, and now you know the history around it as well. It might make it even more special, and I'm sure you'll understand why it was so emotionally draining to perform that show. For now, I shall sign off and say goodbye. Season 1 has come to a close, and it's been really brilliant. It's been fantastic to do this every week. It's been wonderful chatting with you all and hearing your thoughts and comments, and I can't wait to come back and do the same with Season 2. But until then, take care everyone, and goodbye.